Good afternoon, everyone. On July 1st, 2009, Dr. James Dale Rottweiler became the 11th president of Cochise College. And for over 15 years, his vision and leadership has paved the way for the extensive growth of the college across the county, as well as around the world. He's someone who has learned about culture, created a culture, and affected an entire culture. And he is Dr. J.D. Rottweiler, and this is Someone You Should Know with Jeff Davenport, brought to you by SSVEC, Sulphur Springs Valley Electric Cooperative, serving our community. J.D., thank you so much for your time today, man. It is great to see you.
That's quite an introduction.
It is. Well,
did my mom write that up
she
for
did.
you?
I know. It was great. I got in touch with her.
James Dale Rottweiler.
I gotta go with the government. You know, we're gonna go with the government here. It's J.D. with J.D. It's basically what this is. But I want to take this interview from the perspective of some words that I believe that can sum you up as a person and as a president. And those are three words. I look at the words leadership, partnership, and culture. And I want to start with the categories of culture and leadership, specifically in your pre-college years before you went to college. It's been said that good leaders build products, great leaders build cultures. So my question to start off this interview is, what type of culture were you raised in? And who were the leaders that you looked up to in your early years, maybe in grade school, high school, before you went to college?
Well, clearly I've been raised by great parents. And parents and home life makes a huge difference in anybody's life. But I will also say, but take my home life and you combine that with my educational experience. I am a product of public schools. And I believe public schools, community schools, is where differences are made in communities. And so when you talk about those that were influential, obviously school teachers, coaches. Now, I'm a first-generation college graduate, so I did not come from a family of college graduates. My father and my mother dabbled a little bit in college, which was not uncommon in that generation.
To take a class or two?
To take a class or two, thinking that maybe where they wanted to go, life, careers, other things play a factor in there. And so clearly education was important in my family. My mom and dad stressed that. But I had to kind of find those other pathways to find my way to college. And so I look a lot at some of my early teachers, high school coaches were very influential in my life.
You remember their names?
I do.
Who are they?
So Tino Navarro was my football coach for years.
Coach Navarro, shout out.
Coach Navarro, yeah. And then I had a high school principal, Glenn Burgess. And I think of him, it's kind of interesting. He took interest in me. I've realized, I think, later in life that he was probably using me to get information, which was fine. He also became one of my coaches for track and field. And just to show the impact the man had on my life, you had the graduation, you got your diploma, and of course it had handwritten in as the principal, Glenn Burgess, by the machine. He went in and found my diploma, and underneath that, in handwritten in quotes, put Coach Burgess. And I've treated that with a real respect and honor for years that he would take the time to do that. And I might mention, when I went back as an executive vice president at Central Wyoming College, which is where I was in my hometown of Riverton, I really sought out to talk to him and hopefully make him very proud. So him and Carl Andre, I mean, there were just a number of individuals who were very influential in my life.
Now, you mentioned that you were a first-generation college graduate. When you made the decision to go to college, was it kind of intimidating or was it challenging? And when you started, was the plan to always get that doctorate?
Well, I'll answer it. I'm kind of a social guy, as you know. My friends were going to college, so I guess I'll go to college. Fortunately, I hung around with friends who college was in their mind. Their parents were well educated. And so when they went to take the ACT test, I went to take the ACT test. When they went to college days, I went to college days. And so it just became a natural flow to go into college. A doctorate, no, I didn't really, I'm not sure I would even know what a doctorate was when I entered into post-secondary education.
And getting to that point, what ultimately led you to the University of Wyoming, just because it was...
Well, initially I went to Riggs College, which was a junior college at the time. It's now BYU, Idaho.
Yeah.
I went there because I had friends and buddies going there, and it seemed like the right thing to do. And I went, and I will admit, when I talk about high school teachers having impact, I met some people at the college and university level that forever changed my life. Jack Reinwand was at Ricks College at the time, Garth Massey at the University of Wyoming. I realized that I'd always been a good student. I wouldn't say that I, excelled high or that it came easy. I just always went up. But when I got to the college and university level, it just opened my horizons, that all of a sudden I could see the world differently, think things that I'd not thought of before, and really broaden. Remember, I'm a kid that comes from a town of 10,000 people, and so to all of a sudden think and see things in a different light was enlightening.
How much, you mentioned specifically one of your influences was one of your high school coaches. How big of a role did sports play as you came into graduating high school and going into college for yourself? Did you have opportunities to play at the next level?
I did. I mean, there were opportunities that were going to be there. I didn't take advantage of those. There were obviously some things that played out in there, but, athletics taught me a lot. Being a member of a team is important. And as you might guess, I was a linebacker, where you're highly dependent upon others and you make things happen, and how that team comes together. I mean, despite all the discussion out there about football and head injuries and all, I can think of no other sport that creates a sense of teamwork where you have to do things together and everybody has to do their job in order to be successful. And sometimes the people that are required to do the most are the ones you'll know the name the least. And
all the linemen.
all the linemen. And then the other part, I think it taught me how to win, and it taught me how to lose. And both of those are important parts of life. And the other part is it just teaches you at times to do hard things. I can remember as a young high school athlete out doing up downs and running and thinking to myself, I'm going to die. And then getting to the end and realizing I didn't die. And then the next time you could go a little further and you could do a little bit more. And I talk about it with my children all the time, that sometimes you just have to learn to embrace the suck, that sometimes things are just going to suck. And if you put your head down and you don't procrastinate and you give your best effort, you can make it through the suck and good things happen on the other end.
What is it about you that's inside of you to put your head down and get past the suck? Was it experiences as you were younger, or was it just that determination that you were born with?
I think just the determination I was born with. I can't. My kids ask me. People ask me all the time. I don't know. I mean, I was raised in an environment where I was loved and cared for. I was encouraged to achieve, and we lived in an environment where you had to work. Horses had to be fed. Cows had to be milked. There were things that had to be done. Chores had to be done in order before you could sit down and go to dinner. The horses had to be fed. And when you're in rural Wyoming, and it's in the winter, sometimes the water trough fills up with ice, and so you got to haul water out every day, and it just becomes part of doing the stuff. And you embrace the suck. It's going to be cold, and you're going to slosh water, but if you just get it done, it's done. If you drag it out for 2 or 3 hours, the suck's going to be a lot longer. I don't know.
I think that's great. So when you wrap up at Ricks College, did you get a degree, an associate's degree, or did you go straight to University?
So I didn't. So the interesting part, this is when you want to talk about life-changing things in culture. So after my first year at Ricks College, I chose to serve a church mission for the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints.
And where did that take you?
And I was assigned to go to Japan. And so you take a rural kid raised in Idaho and Wyoming, and you give him 2 months training. He thinks he can speak Japanese. You put him on a plane and he arrives in Tokyo. That's a life-changing experience.
And 2 years.
2 years.
That many people who are watching this right now or who will watch this, they go through that process.
They do.
With Church of Jesus Christ.
My father served a mission as a young man in Germany, and my son served one in Peru, and I was fortunate to go to Japan, which for me was so fundamentally changing in a couple ways. Culturally, it was as opposite of the United States as you could be, and yet it was a first world country. And so you could see that there were different ways of doing things and accomplishing things and philosophies of how you viewed the world that could actually come out with amazing results. That there are different ways of doing things than the West does it, that have long histories and see amazing success.
It's interesting that was when you get selected for a mission, do you get to choose? You don't. They say, "Hey, you're going to Japan.
That's exactly
Pack
right.
your bags."
That's exactly right. And as an 18-year-old, 19-year-old, I was so sophisticated. I looked to see what shots do I have to go there. I was more concerned about what shots I would need than where I was going. But a game changer in my life, changed everything educationally, changed everything on my outlook, and I think it's greatly influenced my career.
Well, and that's how it kind of connects, because when you came back to the University of Wyoming, you majored in sociology, going on to get your master's in sociology, but minored in Japanese. Did being in that culture give you that advantage to take a course like that? And how does Wyoming offer the Japanese?
Well, it's interesting. So when I came back, I actually went back to Rick's College.
Oh, okay.
But I only went for one semester because that Jack Ryden one, that influential professor, pulled me in and said, so when I came back, I came in January. So I just had the one semester. I took my courses. Because I could speak Japanese fluently, I tested out of 16 college credits in Japanese.
Oh, wow.
And I was, I think, one course short, one gen ed course. I don't know, maybe biology or something. And Jack Ryden one was my advisor and my mentor. And he said, you don't need to come back here. Why don't you go on to the university? You can transfer us that one class and you'll graduate. So I'm kind of unique in that I have my associate's degree actually after I have my bachelor's and master's degree, because I didn't think to send it back in until I was working there. And he said, you need to send that in. So I sent it in. And so I have my associate's degree comes actually after my bachelor's and master's, even though all those credits and all those classes except for one led to all the prerequisites for my bachelor's and master's.
That's fantastic. What an experience. Learning about world cultures, especially at a young age, how does something like that, when you come from a rural area and you go to a foreign country, how does that affect not just your ultimate vision of as a student and as someone who's practicing their religion in that country, but being able to take that and form that for the rest of a path that has yet to be determined?
Well, I think language acquisition, learning a second language, gives you a completely different perspective on the world and how things are viewed and what words make up what and how you interact with people and what is an honorific and what is, how you interact with people at the same level, how you honor others, and all of that stuff gives you a perspective that you realize people. And then the other part that was so insignificant in my life was about that time in Japan, all the work of Deming was coming out, Professor Deming, and how you could take ideas and you could do advanced manufacturing to increase quality and efficiency. And then the Japanese model of corporation, of where you come in and you start and your salary may be fairly low, but you're all in it together, and then you get profit sharing, and so we all work together. And that was at a time when the best automobiles in the world were being made in Japan, right. The best technology, so Sony and those things, and they were taking what was once big and making things smaller and more compatible, and just all of their expertise that could come in and really shape the entire world in a philosophy that was different than ours. And the part that was so interesting is the United States, American culture, the individual was really creative. We had lots of great creative ideas. But the Japanese, where they may lack a little creativity, found a way through just hard work and just doing it over and over and over again, could perfect the process to then all of a sudden take great American ideas and perfect them under Japanese ideology or culture.
And bringing that back to the States, you didn't stop with that bachelor's degree or master's degree. From what I've learned is you earned your PhD in educational leadership and policy from the University of Utah, and your dissertation was on university presidents by institutional type, control, and reputation. When you're doing a dissertation like that in a presidential profile, did you find certain leadership traits that you would ultimately adapt in your own leadership style throughout that dissertation?
So it was probably less about traits, but I think it does tie the two areas that I find the most interesting in all of my research and all of my development. I'm always interested in culture and intergenerational transmission of culture. So my master's thesis at the University of Wyoming was intergenerational transmission of culture, trying to predict the next generation of American hunters. So you see this in the United States. We utilize hunting as a way to do wildlife management. And we've seen over the years a decrease in the number of hunters. And how is the culture of hunting, kind of a Western phenomenon, transmitted from generation to generation? So I looked at all of those influences in that intergenerational transmission of culture. At the same time I was doing that, I was looking at cultural influences. I did a documentary film on Japanese religious festivals, how festivals that used to have religious meaning have now taken a secular meaning, but they become festivals of unity, causes the community to come together. And so you transmit through religious culture, really secular purposes today. And so that ties in. So culture and the transmission is key. And then the other part was social mobility. How does one move within a society? How do they elevate themselves? Clearly in the United States, we tend to be very much a meritocracy. You can earn your way. The beauty of America, I tell our students all the time at graduation, you live in the greatest country in the world. You can be anything you want to be. You can do anything you want to do, but you have to do it. And so that social mobility, I look at my career's all about social mobility and being able to. So what that dissertation was tied to was, could you predict at the most elite universities in the world, in the country, what the social parameters were that would allow you to move into that position? And you know what the biggest indicator was? The decision you made as an 18-year-old on where you go get your bachelor's degree. So you can suffice it to say the president of Harvard University is not getting their bachelor's degree at the University of Wyoming.
Unbelievable.
And I had a mentor who was on that, one of my dissertation committee members, who became the president of the University of Arizona, Ann Weaver Hart.
No way.
She was on my committee at the University of Utah, and she had moved around. When I presented my findings, she rolled her eyes and she said, I always suspected that was the case, that the decision I made as an 18-year-old to stay at the University of Utah with my boyfriend, rather than taking my full ride scholarship to Brown, would greatly influence my career choices. So clearly the decisions we make, now there's ways around those, and I showed models that you could do multiple presidencies and you could do some things to elevate your status in those organizations. But in the end, the decisions we make greatly influence where we go.
And you not only went, but you went to a lot of different places. I don't mean to wrap up your pre-Cochise college years on a bow like this, but after spending time at colleges in Wyoming, Iowa, and Utah, 2009 rolls around. You find your way to this place, Sierra Vista, Douglas, Cochise College. The process and impression coming from a rural background like yourself, what was it like coming here for maybe the first couple of times to explore and see if this would be that rural area that would feel almost like home for someone from a rural area?
So I was very selective. I was at a college where there was a succession plan. I was pretty well positioned, but I'd had a career opportunities to teach in urban areas, in smaller colleges, in career and technical colleges, and all of that kind of rounded out some experiences. And I should mention, I had opportunities to do things at the university level, but one of the things I remembered my experience was, if we can provide almost a liberal arts educational experience for students living in rural areas, it can fundamentally change their lives. And so I've looked for colleges that had a residential component, also kind of a commuter campus urban type environment. And miraculously, Cochise College fit many of those things.
Like checks those boxes as you're going down the list.
And so my wife and I were looking a little bit, and everything just kind of felt right. And within my faith, I think God's hand was in there. There's a little divine intervention that this is where we were supposed to be. And I think, over the last 16 years, those things have kind of worked out accordingly.
Well, without a doubt. And during your interview process back then in 2009, did you even have an idea of the indelible mark that you would ultimately be able to leave? Or did you have a vision right away and say, I think I know these things that need to come into place for this to continue to grow? How did you see it as a leader and as someone who has that vision from minute one? Could you see what it's become today?
So I'm not sure I could see everything, but I knew that I wanted to go to a place where I could do value added. So I wanted it to be a place that was good. I had lots of opportunities. There are lots of opportunities to go to colleges that are in trouble. They're in financial trouble. There's fighting amongst the board and the I mean, I wasn't interested in that. I was interested in going to a place where it was good, stable foundation, and I could bring value-added things and move it to the next level. And so I could see some things that needed to go there. Now, I also recognized during my interview when I was here, I'll never forget. There were two people that were one was on the committee, a psychology professor who was really a mover and shaker. And when I went in to do the interview with the group, he kind of pushed me to talk about the things you're doing that are moving and shaking where you're at and all that stuff. And as we were leaving that, a wise old aviation professor had been at the college for 30 some odd years, became professor emeritus. And he pulled me aside and he said, JD, you did really, really good. And he says, that psychology professor, he's young and energetic. I am old and towards the end of my career. I'm excited to do some changes, but please assure me you are not going to rock my world. And I realized then that I needed to make sure that I balanced not only new innovation and new ideas, but making sure we brought the entire institution along. He was committed. He wanted the very best for the college. And he told me, he says, you're going to be the first president we've hired off the street in 30 years. Your ideas are going to be fresh and exciting, but assure me you're not going to rock my world. And so I've always tried to balance rocking people's world, making sure that I tell people all the time, you can come in and rock the boat. But as a leader, you have a responsibility to stay and make sure everybody gets back in the boat. And unfortunately today in higher education, I think we see many drop-in presidents come in, are really good at rocking the boat. They get everybody in the water and then they leave. And it takes a long time to get everybody back in the boat. I've wanted to make sure that when we rock the boat, we stay long enough to get everybody back in the boat. And I will tell you, by staying 7, 10, 15 years, I've been able to really see the benefits of doing that and seeing those ideas come to full fruition. And that's been incredibly rewarding.
And that's where I want to take this interview in the next level. By the way, you're watching Someone You Should Know with Jeff Davenport talking to JD Rottweiler, president of Cochise College, brought to you by SSVEC. We've talked about culture. We've talked about leadership. I think the next word that sums up what you've been able to do in your, whether it's rocking the boat or just bringing everybody along for, just putting the sail up and letting you kind of direct it as the captain steering the ship. It's about partnerships. And that's one thing that I found to be remarkable is about these partnerships that you've helped create. And so much has happened just in the last handful of years. Obviously, everything that happens around here has been years in the making, or a year in the making, if not years from conceptualizing it to making it a physical thing. The downtown campus in Sierra Vista, to me, I think is one of the most brilliant and largest scale things that Cochise College has done by adding that campus. But it all happens from partnerships. How did the downtown campus come about?
Well, I think it is about partnerships, and it's about making those connections. And then I've always kind of used this analogy that what we need to do is we need to find ways to take what are our liabilities and turn them to assets, and then take those assets and utilize them to change the world. And so always looking around and saying, what are the liabilities of the college? What are the liabilities of our community? Now, some of those liabilities are just location. You're in a rural area, so you may not have access to everything. So how do you take that liability that's in there? Well, healthcare and jobs are a key thing. And so if we're going to keep rural healthcare alive, you got to have nurses. And so you find ways to leverage nurses, and you then need clinical hospitals, and you need those relationships. And so early in my career at Cochise College, I met with Margaret Hepburn at that time. She was the CEO, the president of the hospital. And at some point we thought it's time for us to do it. And so we actually laid out and did some initial sketch and did some design work. We were going to build our own building. It's going to be 38,000 square feet. It was going to be a 2-story building.
Was it going to be here on
this? It was going to be on this campus.
Wow.
It's designed, if you go over by the science building, you'll actually see a nice square that was all prepped and ready for that building to go in there.
Didn't know that. Wow.
And that was about the time that Canyon Vista had taken over and they were building the new hospital. And I went out, I was invited by the Legacy Foundation and the hospital to go and take a tour of the new hospital while I was being constructed. And being somewhat entrepreneurial and trying to take liabilities and assets, I took the plans and I shared, here's what we're going to try to do. And I thought, there's probably an opportunity here. Rather than asking the Legacy Foundation for money, what I would ask them to do is front the money and have their contribution be the interest that we would otherwise have to pay if we borrowed the money. And I'd seen that model work in Wyoming where a benefactor would loan $10 million. The college would then pay that back over 10, 20 years. They would write off the interest, and it was kind of a win-win on both ends. And so I made that sales pitch. And I'll never forget, as I made that sales pitch, some leaders from Legacy Foundation came back and said, how about we rethink that? How about we not do that? How about we just give you the old hospital? And so I came back, visited with the board, and we looked into it a little bit. And clearly you could see the old hospital is going to be a liability in the middle of town if somebody's not going to go in there. And at the time, they looked at turning it into a veterans home. There had been lots of other things that had been talked about. And when that wasn't going to occur, well, then what do we do? And so how do we take that potential liability and turn it into an asset? And so by reviewing that for basically the same amount of money, maybe a little bit more that we were going to spend in building a 38,000 square foot building that would give us just barely what we needed. We got 100,000 square feet, and we renewed a facility in the middle of the camp, in the middle of the city. And I think by and large, it's turned out to be an amazing asset. It's something I'm incredibly proud of.
Absolutely, you should be. And of course, in the mid-90s, when I was attending Cochise College, the nursing program was always, one of those peaks of excellence at this school. And partnering with these amazing healthcare facilities has been just a huge win-win, like you said, for both sides.
Over 80% of all practicing nurses in Cochise County have their initial training at Cochise College. So, if you think about that for a minute, if you don't have Cochise College in our nursing program, you don't have nurses in our various facilities and in doctors' offices. And I'm not sure you don't see the decline of healthcare in rural Arizona. And it's a challenge anyway. But it's a challenge that can be met when hospitals and Legacy Foundation and the college and doctors come together to take what is that liability and turn it into an asset.
And that's through partnerships. From healthcare education, you also created partnerships that will build generations of law enforcement officers who will protect me.
A reservist in that they would go part-time in the evening and not necessarily be fully employed. So it was a way to just build the next generation slowly over time. So we'd laid out some plans, and it was all going to be about just the police academy. I hope my house didn't catch on fire or there's something going on there. And so I took it. And he said, JD, there's been some changes with the academy in Tucson, and we can't get our people through. Can we speed this up? And I said, well, I'll be home shortly, and we can sit down and have a conversation. And so between the Sheriff's Department, Sierra Vista PD, we sat together and talked about how we could collectively create and recreate the Southeast Arizona Law Enforcement Training Academy. And that was kind of the initial stuff that we talked about, the first thing that was in there. And then about that time, COVID and everything else hit. And we could see the impact on first responders. And so we leveraged that and talked about, well, what if we ran other, frankly, probably one of the most state-of-the-art police and law enforcement, as well as paramedic and fire training academies in the entire country.
And again, a lot of this has literally happened in the last handful of years as it's all kind of been wrapping up.
But I should mention, there's some other ones that happen in there just by being in the right place at the right time and talking about those liabilities. The fact that we couldn't train police officers locally was a liability.
Right.
We've now turned that into an asset. We can go back 8 years ago, just in communications, there was lots of discussion about Old Frytown. And what were we going to do with some of those trailers? And there were liens and there were discussions about blighted areas, and it just had lots of political noise around it. And in the course of that, a partnership between the county and the city came together where the county waived some liens if they would turn some properties over to the city of Sierra Vista. So the two were tied in there together. And they said, well, what are we going to do with these old, really rundown trailer parks that people could not live in? There were squatters. It was unhealthy. So the city used some grant money and cleared the lots. Anyway, soon to be emerging, we hadn't really talked about it, but let's build some houses as part of a construction trades program. So the city and the county donated property to the college. The college then worked with the foundation to get all of the necessary, requirements of lumber and all that other stuff. And we build a house a year as the project house. The foundation then sells that. And if you go into Old Frytown today, there's now 7, 8 homes that have been occupied by families looking for housing. And it's been kind of a combination of education, community development, and affordable housing that is a win-win for all in there. We took what was a liability and we turned it into an asset.
And again, I could be here all day. When the bachelor's degree programs, to working with Fort Huachuca, to being able to put together the housing, residence housing here on this Sierra Vista campus. There's so much more that Dr. Rottweiler has done, but we got to wrap this up somehow. So I want to go back to athletics. You talked about how
Sure.
athletics were important to you. How proud are you of the Cochise College athletic program? It's something that we've been able to kind of partner with you all on, and being able to see the sports teams, from the soccer, the basketball, the baseball, being able to watch these teams end up recruiting literally from all around the world and see them excel at some amazing levels in the ACCAC.
Yeah, I believe athletics is a gateway in for many students. And it is a place that you can gain community pride, college commitment. And we've been incredibly blessed at Cochise College. It goes back to the very earliest origins of the college with the Apaches and what that has mean. But I think you see the two of them, as well as Misty Opat and Santos. I mean, they've all done some things where they have taken what is a liability, Cochise College, Douglas campus, middle of nowhere, on the border, all the other things. And we have student athletes that show up there the first week and they say, "Where have I come?" And then they'll go on to Arizona State University. I'm thinking of a female basketball player who says, "I can only think of my time at Cochise. It changed my life." Male basketball players that have been to, Washington State and now South Dakota State and others at U of A that talk about their experience at Cochise College. Because what those coaches have done is they took that liability and turned it into, in Jerry's term, Camp Cochise.
Yeah.
If all you want to do is eat, sleep, and play basketball or baseball or soccer or fly a plane or do art, Cochise College is the right place. And I think that opportunity for students to come in, and then for us now to broaden and bring in really the world to Douglas. And so we've tried to bring the world to them to broaden their educational experience, very similar to I had at Ricks College.
And that's an amazing thing. Again, if you've never been inside the Cochise Stronghold Gymnasium, there are banners all around, literally wrapping around the entire place, showing how strong and consistent those programs have excelled with excellence. One thing that I forgot to mention was, of all the things that we could talk about, another thing was the role that Cochise College played during this last presidential election, being able to host a presidential candidate forum at the Douglas campus, you being able to welcome, at the time, the 45th president off of Trump Force One on the tarmac at the Sierra Vista Airport. Cochise College was very involved on the political side, on both sides of the aisle.
Well, it goes, I hate to give them back to liabilities and assets. They weren't coming because they wanted to come to Cochise College.
Wait, what? No, that can't be true.
They were coming because there's a border issue. So that's been a liability that our county has faced for years. How do we take that liability and turn it into an asset and give our students opportunities to meet legislators, governors, former presidents? And I think Sheriff Daniels has seen that vision. Some of our mayors have seen that vision, that you can work within those areas that are liabilities. But despite all that, there's excellence happening, and excellence breeds excellence. And so whether it be the college, the cities, our law enforcement agencies, if we create a culture of excellence, that we're going to do the very best with what we have. I tell our employees at Cochise all the time, we are not a rich school. We are not rich by any means, but we have plenty of resources to do what we want to do. The difficulty is deciding what we want to do and then doing it the very best we can.
I listened to you talk, and I I hear this passion that I think could go on for another 15 years, but instead, the choice came to step back and say, I'll tap out at this point in time. As you're getting ready to exit Cochise College, I want you to talk a little bit about what the next step is for you, for those who don't know what you have going on. Because people are thinking, oh, he's just going to retire and hang out and he'll just be at the house and playing with the kids and the grandkids and doing all that. There are some big things in store for the Rottweiler family.
Yeah, so you kind of go full circle. I talked about the impact of people on my life. In the end, I've led large organizations. I've worked in communities and with government officials. But in the end, I have kind of a desire to go back and be Glenn Burgess and Tino Navarro and to just impact people on a more individual basis. And so my wife and I have been incredibly blessed, and we'd like to kind of end our careers either back in the classroom or doing something that we believe is incredibly meaningful on a one-on-one basis. And so we have been called to serve as a communications public affairs specialist for the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints in Mongolia. And so we will leave end of April to go to Mongolia, where we will work with government leaders, educational leaders, religious leaders, interfaith leaders, to really try to ensure that democracy is kept in a fledgling country between China and Russia. I mean, they are a thriving democracy. And what keeps democracy healthy? Access to education, access to religious freedom, access to an educated citizenry. And so we long to really work with other on an individual basis, whether that be teaching English as a second language and knowing by teaching somebody how to speak English can change not only their life, but their entire family's life. Working with government leaders to show them methods and ways to protect their citizenry, working with educational leaders to show how a program in residential construction trades or nursing or law enforcement can change not only individuals but communities. We want to take that and move it down a level and work more on an individual basis.
Well, my goodness, thinking about a big trip like that coming up, I know I can see the excitement in you right now, just preparing for it mentally.
But I'll also say we're not leaving. Cochise County is our home.
Yes.
We will maintain our home here. We'll be gone 18 months, and then I'll be back, and I'll be looking to get re-engaged in the community. Whether that be, being the public announcer for a high school basketball game or calling a football game with you and the sheriff, running for office. I don't know what it'll be.
Yeah.
We are so committed to community. Community is really what it's all about. And so we'll re-engage in the process. But I think a little bit of time away to let the new president get his feet underneath him will be a good thing. But I've reminded him, this is my home, this is my college. I'll be back to make sure things are going okay. And if nothing else, I'll look to push a broom at strongholds.
I'll be back. Before we wrap up, is there a phrase or word that maybe you would use to describe your time here at Cochise College? This last 15 years of your life, that's a decade and a half. I mean, many people don't even spend that long at one career, much less, in one job, much less that entire time leading this organization.
It's interesting you say that. I was interviewing somebody the other day, and they say, yeah, the college is celebrating 60 years, and you've been here 15. That's a quarter of the time. Thinking, wow, that makes it feel a whole lot different. I think the word I would use is community. I've talked about with our staff, I guess it's really two words, hyper-local. What community colleges do better than anybody else is hyper-local. Just if we keep our eyes on local, if we keep our eyes on how we can improve the community we live in, our neighbors. I mean, the people we work with here, we recreate with, we worship with. We are dependent upon each other. And so how can we work collectively to take our liabilities, turn them into assets, and most importantly, change the world and the outlook for people?
Is there anything you want to say to the community about that time, and speaking on behalf of you and your family?
I just would say, for my wife and I, and for I don't think when we came in 2009 we thought it would be our home. I think you always hope for that, and I really draw that down to the difference. It's not our house; it's our home. We've had lots of houses, but Sierra Vista and Cochise College has been our home, and Cochise County, and it always will be. And it's just a great place to be part of.
At the beginning of this interview, I read this quote: "Good leaders build things. Great leaders built cultures. And of course, JD, you were someone who learned about culture, created a culture, and affected an entire culture. And that is why he is someone you should know. It is Dr. JD Rottweiler.
Thank you.
Amazing. Again, I could spend all day with you talking about the amazing things that have happened here at Cochise College. But thank you guys so much for watching this episode of Someone You Should Know with Jeff Davenport, brought to you by SSVEC, Sulphur Springs Valley Electric Cooperative, serving our community. Do us a favor. If you are a Cochise College alumni like me or not, maybe you got kids who are looking at going to Cochise College, you need to share this video around. Let people know about the amazing advances that this school has taken under the leadership and vision of this man and the entire team here, from the board to all of the assistants and associates in the administration, to all the faculty that really get on board with these amazing opportunities